Welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive? This time, we're going to tackle something a little spooky, a little mysterious.
Nightmares.
Nightmares, exactly. We've had a ton of you write in wanting to know more about them, and honestly, same here.
Yeah,
So,
what causes
what
them?
causes them? What do they mean? And, like, is there anything we can do about them?
Right.
You guys sent in some really interesting stuff, too, by the way. We've got medical advice from a clinic, a scientific study.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and even a couple of those like science articles that kind of explore different angles of nightmares. So
Cool.
we're going to be diving deep today.
I love it.
By the end of this, hopefully you'll not only get the science behind these nighttime terrors,
Yeah.
but also, you know, maybe walk away with some practical tips to like actually sleep better.
That would be awesome. It's funny because nightmares are often just brushed off as like just bad dreams, right?
I,
But honestly, they can have a real impact on our lives.
oh, for sure. And you know what really surprised me?
What's that?
They aren't just a kid thing. Like one of the articles you sent mentioned a British study where 1 in 20 adults said they have nightmares weekly.
Wow. That is a lot more common than you might think.
Right.
Yeah, which makes this deep dive even more important, I think, because it
That's it.
suggests there are a lot of adults out there living with this, and maybe they don't even realize there could be treatments or...
Exactly. So let's start with the basics. Like, what even is a nightmare? How is
Right.
it different from just having like a bad dream?
I think the key difference really boils down to this. A nightmare wakes you up. It's
Oh.
not just a scary dream that you forget in the morning.
Right, right.
It jolts you awake, heart racing, and often those feelings of fear and anxiety just linger.
It's almost like your body's like fight or flight response kicking in, even though you're safe in your bed.
Exactly. Your brain's basically saying, hey, this is serious, wake up.
Yeah.
And scientifically speaking,
Yeah.
most nightmares happen during REM sleep, that deep sleep stage when our brains are super active.
That's when we have most of our dreams anyway, right?
Right. Good or bad, most dreams happen towards the end of the night when we cycle through those longer stretches of REM sleep.
Okay.
But here's the thing. Nightmares tied to PTSD.
Yeah.
Those are the exception. They can happen all night long, which suggests something else is going on,
It's almost like the trauma bypasses the normal sleep process, like intruding into other sleep stages.
That's a really good way to put it. And it really makes you wonder how the brain handles trauma, especially when we're supposed to be resting. So during REM sleep,
Yeah.
there's this part of your brainstem called the pons that actually paralyzes your muscles.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so you don't act out your dreams.
Good thing. Things could get messy otherwise.
You're telling me. But while the pons is keeping us still, it's still sending signals to other parts of the brain, like the thalamus and cerebral cortex. Those are the areas involved in processing emotions and information. So even though our bodies are physically still, our brains are very active, creating those vivid dream experiences. But with PTSD-related nightmares, it seems like the trauma might be interfering with the normal REM processes, leading to nightmares even outside of those REM cycles.
Wow, that's kind of unsettling.
Yeah.
It really shows how deeply trauma can affect us. And speaking of unsettling,
Yeah.
one of the sources mentioned that, if you have frequent nightmares, like really disturbing ones that mess with your daily life, it could be a sign of something called nightmare disorder.
Right. And a lot of times it goes undiagnosed. It's not just having bad dreams, it's a recognized condition, and it can really impact your waking life.
So, like, what does that look like? What are some of the signs someone might have nightmare disorder?
Well, imagine being constantly afraid of the next nightmare, feeling anxious even as you're trying to fall asleep.
Right.
You might be exhausted all day because your sleep is so messed up. You might even have trouble concentrating at work or at school.
It's like the nightmares are spilling over into your everyday life, affecting your mood, your energy, everything.
Absolutely. And get this. The Anxiety and Depression Association of America estimates that 6% of Americans might have nightmare disorder.
That many.
That many. That's millions of people whose lives are being affected by these intense nightmares. So it's definitely more common than people think.
That's a big deal. It really underscores why we need to take nightmares seriously and, encourage people to seek help if they're struggling.
Couldn't agree more. So let's dig into some of the potential causes of nightmares. Now, we're still learning a lot, but there's growing evidence that it's tied to how we process our emotions, especially fear and anxiety.
That makes sense. All the sources you sent mentioned stressful events being a common trigger.
Right. It's like our anxieties are bubbling up in our dreams. And it's not just everyday stress. There's a very strong connection between nightmares and mental health conditions like PTSD, anxiety, and depression.
Yeah, that article on PTSD nightmares was pretty intense. It described them as like incredibly realistic, almost like reliving the trauma while you're asleep.
Exactly. And that's why it's crucial to seek help if you're experiencing that kind of nightmare. PTSD is complex and needs specialized treatment.
For sure. So we've got stress, anxiety, mental health conditions, all these internal things that can contribute to nightmares. But what about external factors like medications or substances?
Oh, absolutely. Certain medications, particularly the ones that affect neurotransmitters in the brain, can cause nightmares, both while you're taking them and even sometimes when you stop.
That's a good point. It's always important to talk to your doctor about potential side effects of any medication. And I imagine things like alcohol or drugs that mess with the nervous system can also trigger nightmares, right?
Exactly. They can really disrupt sleep patterns, and that can lead to those really vivid, often disturbing dreams we call nightmares. And, even something as seemingly harmless as not getting enough sleep
Yeah.
can worsen nightmares because of what's called REM rebound.
Oh, right. That's what we talked about earlier, how if our brain's trying to make up for lost REM sleep,
Yeah.
it can lead to more intense dreams.
Precisely. And this really highlights how important good sleep hygiene is. It's not just about feeling well rested, it's about giving our brains the time to process emotions and consolidate memories properly.
Right, right. It's like we're giving our brains the space they need to work things out. But one of the articles brought up a connection between chronic nightmares and something much more serious, suicide risk.
Yeah, that's a heavy topic, but a really important one to address. Research shows a clear link, particularly for individuals with PTSD who experience those vivid, trauma-related nightmares. It's not that the nightmares directly cause suicidal thoughts, but they contribute to a cycle of distress, sleep disruption, and a sense of hopelessness that can increase vulnerability.
It's like that constant reliving of trauma, combined with the exhaustion from poor sleep, creates a really difficult situation.
Exactly. And there's evidence to support this. One study found that people with PTSD who specifically had nightmares they could remember were at a higher risk of attempting suicide again. That's a powerful finding, and it really emphasizes the need for early intervention and treatment for both PTSD and nightmares.
Absolutely. This is heavy stuff, but it's so important to talk about.
Hmm.
And it brings us to a hopeful point, too, because there are treatments that can help people manage these nightmares, right?
There are several effective treatments, both medication and therapy-based.
That's incredibly reassuring for anyone struggling with this. So let's talk about those treatment options, because I think knowing there's help available is a huge first step.
Of course. For PTSD-related nightmares, there's a medication called prazosin that's shown some promise. It was originally used to treat high blood pressure, but it's been found to reduce nightmare frequency and intensity in some people with PTSD.
It's interesting. It's amazing how a drug meant for one thing can have these unexpected benefits for something completely different.
It really is. But it's not always a long-term solution, which is where therapy comes in. There are several types of therapy that specifically target nightmares, and they can be really effective. Two of the most common ones are imagery rehearsal therapy, or IRT, and exposure, relaxation, and rescripting therapy, which is a mouthful, so we'll call it ERT.
Okay, IRT and ERT, got it. So how do these therapies actually work?
They basically involve rewriting the nightmare narrative. With guidance from a therapist, the patient creates a new, less distressing version of the nightmare and practices visualizing it before going to sleep. This repeated rehearsal can actually change how the nightmare plays out in their mind.
Oh, wow, that's fascinating. One of the sources mentioned an example where a patient with a recurring nightmare about a friend dying was able to rescript it so they could say goodbye. That's so powerful.
It is. And while these therapies might sound a little unusual, they have a solid scientific basis, and they've helped a lot of people.
That's really encouraging to hear. And one of the studies you provided showed that even a single session of therapy focused on nightmares can have a positive effect. Imagine that, just one session making a difference.
It really shows how even small steps toward addressing this issue can have a big impact. So we've talked about the science, potential causes, the impact nightmares have on our lives, and even some treatment options. But I think there's something else we need to touch on. The why behind nightmares. What are they trying to tell us?
Right. It's like beyond the brain waves and sleep cycles, there's also that psychological, maybe even spiritual side of nightmares.
I agree.
It's like they're tapping into our subconscious, revealing things we might not even be aware of when we're awake.
Right. Some experts believe that nightmares, like all dreams, are our brain's way of processing emotions, working through tough experiences, and trying to make sense of the world.
It's like our brain's way of working things out while we sleep, kind of cleaning house, so to speak.
In a way, yes. And while some nightmares might be just random neuron firings, others might hold symbolic messages that can give us insights into our own minds.
That's so interesting. But how do we decipher those messages? Some of my nightmares are just plain bizarre. I don't even know where to start.
It's about paying attention to recurring themes, the emotions that come up, and the symbols that appear. Ask yourself, what might this represent in my waking life? What fears or anxieties might be manifesting in this symbolic form?
So we should treat our nightmares like they're trying to communicate with us.
Exactly. And this is where dream journaling can be really helpful. Taking the time to write down your nightmares, even if they're fragmented or confusing, can help you start to see patterns and make connections.
I love that idea. It's like turning nightmares into a source of self-discovery. And that brings us to another fascinating aspect of nightmares, their potential connection to creativity.
Oh, yes. Some researchers believe that nightmares, with their vivid imagery and often surreal stories, can actually stimulate creative thinking.
That makes sense when you think about artists, writers, musicians. They often draw inspiration from their dreams.
Right. And while we don't want to romanticize nightmares, it's interesting to consider that they might have this unintended benefit of sparking creativity.
So instead of fearing our nightmares, maybe we can approach them with a sense of curiosity, even a bit of gratitude for the unique perspective they offer.
I love that. It's about recognizing that even these dark and disturbing experiences can have a purpose, a meaning, and the potential to teach us something valuable about ourselves.
It's all about shifting our perspective, which leads us to another important point: seeking professional help if nightmares are consistently disrupting your life.
Absolutely. While good sleep hygiene is a great place to start, if you're experiencing frequent, distressing nightmares that interfere with your daily life, it's crucial to reach out to a healthcare professional.
Right. They can help determine the best course of action, especially if it's more than just bad dreams, but a sign of an underlying mental health condition.
Exactly. A therapist can help you navigate those complex emotions and develop coping mechanisms to manage the distress, both in your waking life and in your dreams.
And they can also help you explore those deeper meanings behind your nightmares and unlock the potential for growth and healing within them.
Right. It's about recognizing that nightmares, while often frightening and unpleasant, can also be a catalyst for positive change.
That's a powerful message. So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive into the world of nightmares, I'm curious, what stands out to you from all this research and information? What's the one thing our listeners should take away from this conversation so far?
You know, what fascinates me the most is this idea that nightmares, even though they're often seen as purely negative experiences, might actually serve a valuable purpose. It's this whole concept of nightmares as a form of emotional processing, a way for our brains to work through difficult experiences and maybe even foster creativity.
It's a total mind shift, right? Instead
Yeah.
of dreading those nighttime terrors, we can start to see them as opportunities for growth and self-discovery.
Exactly. And it reminds me of a quote from Carl Jung, the famous Swiss psychiatrist. He said, "The dream is a little hidden door in the innermost and most secret recesses of the soul."
Ooh, I like that. So poetic. What does that quote make you think about?
Well, it speaks to the idea that our dreams, including our nightmares, can provide a glimpse into the deepest parts of ourselves, revealing our hidden fears, desires, and even our potential.
It's like they're holding up a mirror to our subconscious.
And while it might not always be a pleasant reflection, it can be incredibly illuminating.
I love that. So instead of trying to suppress or ignore our nightmares, we can try to embrace them, learn from them, use them as a tool for self-understanding.
And remember, you don't have to do this alone. If nightmares are causing you significant distress or impacting your daily life, there are resources available and professionals who can help.
Absolutely. There's no shame in seeking support. And as we've learned, even simple changes to your sleep hygiene can make a world of difference. Things like establishing a consistent sleep schedule, practicing relaxation techniques, and creating a soothing sleep environment.
Exactly. It's about taking a holistic approach to sleep and recognizing that our nighttime experiences, both good and bad, play a vital role in our overall well-being.
Well said. So we've covered a lot of ground, but there's still so much more to explore. What do you say we take a moment to gather our thoughts and then dive back into the fascinating world of nightmares?
It's wild to think how even small tweaks to our sleep routine can impact our dreams, you know?
Yeah, totally. It's like setting the stage for good sleep.
Exactly. We can't control everything about our dreams, but we can create an environment that encourages peaceful sleep.
Right. And one of the articles you shared actually had some specific tips for improving sleep hygiene, which I thought was really useful.
Yes. And it goes beyond just like get enough sleep.
Hmm.
It's about creating a whole sleep routine, almost a ritual, to signal to your mind and body that it's time to wind down.
So let's break down those tips. What are some actionable steps people can take?
Well, the most important one is probably having a consistent sleep schedule. Going to bed and waking up around the same time every day, even weekends, helps regulate your body's natural sleep-wake cycle. It's called your circadian rhythm.
I know that can be tough for people with like busy or unpredictable schedules.
Yeah.
But even small adjustments help, right?
Absolutely. Even shifting your bedtime by 15 minutes earlier each day can start to make a difference. And what's interesting is that a consistent sleep schedule actually helps prevent that REM rebound effect we talked about earlier.
Oh, that makes sense. If your body's getting to sleep consistently, it doesn't need to cram in all that REM.
Exactly. So consistency is key. Another helpful tip is to include relaxation techniques in your evening routine.
Okay, like what?
Things like deep breathing exercises, meditation, taking a warm bath, listening to calming music, anything that helps you unwind.
I love that. Creating a sense of calm before bed sounds so much better than scrolling through social media until I pass out.
Definitely. Speaking of which, reducing screen time, especially an hour or two before bed, is super important. The blue light from our devices can mess with your body's production of melatonin, the hormone that helps regulate sleep.
It's like tricking our brains into thinking it's still daytime, even when it's time to sleep.
Right. And the content we consume before bed matters too. Stimulating or disturbing content close to bedtime can fuel anxiety and fears that might show up in nightmares.
So maybe swap out that doom scrolling or scary movie for a calming book or some relaxing music instead. Create a more peaceful transition into sleep.
Exactly. And speaking of things to avoid before bed, caffeine and alcohol are big ones.
Oh, yeah. I used to think a glass of wine helped me relax before bed, but I learned the hard way that it can actually mess up your sleep cycles.
It might make you feel sleepy at first, but it interferes with the quality of your sleep later in the night.
And that fragmented sleep can lead to more nightmares.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Okay, so we've got consistent sleep schedule, relaxation techniques, avoiding caffeine and alcohol. What else?
Creating a comfortable and soothing sleep environment is key too. Think about the temperature, darkness, and noise level of your bedroom.
Right.
Make it a haven for sleep, a place where you feel safe and relax.
Ooh, I love that. A sleep haven. What are some ways to make a bedroom more sleep-friendly?
Well, darkness is important. Invest in blackout curtains or a sleep mask if you need to. Temperature is another big one. Most people sleep best in a slightly cool room, around 65 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah, I definitely sleep better when it's cool and comfy.
And minimizing noise is helpful. If you're in a noisy environment, consider a white noise machine or earplugs.
It's all about creating that calm and inviting space for sleep.
Exactly. And while we've been focused on the practical stuff, I think it's important to also consider the psychological side of things. We've talked about nightmares being a way for our brains to work through difficult experiences.
Right.
But what does that really mean for us on a personal level? How do we make sense of those messages our nightmares might be sending?
That's a great question. It's like we're moving from the scientific realm into something a little more, I don't know, mysterious and introspective.
Yeah, sort of. While science gives us insights into the mechanics of nightmares, there's this whole other layer about meaning and interpretation.
So how do we even begin to unpack that meaning? How do we decode those symbolic messages?
I think it starts with paying attention to the details. What are the recurring themes, the emotions, the symbols in your nightmares? Really think about those elements and consider what they might represent in your waking life.
You're saying we should treat our nightmares like they're trying to communicate with us.
Exactly. And just like any form of communication, it takes time and effort to understand the language. Dream journaling can be really powerful for this. Taking a few minutes each morning to write down your nightmares, even if they're fragmented or confusing, can help you see patterns and connections.
I've heard of dream journaling, but never really tried it. Any tips for a newbie?
Sure, get a dedicated notebook or journal just for your dreams. Keep it by your bed so you can jot down your dreams right when you wake up while they're fresh. Don't worry about perfect grammar or anything, just get the thoughts down.
So it's more about capturing the essence of the dream than writing a perfectly polished account.
Right. And as you start to have more entries, look for those recurring themes, symbols, emotions, or even characters that keep popping up. They can give you clues about what your subconscious might be trying to say.
I love that. It's like turning our nightmares into a tool for self-discovery.
And that brings us to another fascinating thing about nightmares, their potential link to creativity.
Oh, tell me more. We touched on this a bit earlier, but I'd love to dig deeper into that connection between nightmares and creativity.
Well, some researchers think that nightmares, with their vivid imagery and often surreal stories, can actually boost creative thinking. It's like they shake things up in our brains, forcing us to see things in new ways.
That makes sense if you think about artists, writers, musicians. They often get inspiration from their dreams.
Exactly. We don't want to romanticize nightmares, but it's interesting to think they might spark creativity as a side effect.
So maybe instead of fearing our nightmares, we can approach them with curiosity and even some gratitude for that unique perspective.
That's such a great point. It's about recognizing that even these dark, disturbing experiences can serve a purpose, have meaning, and potentially teach us something valuable.
It's all about shifting our perspective. Instead of seeing nightmares as something to be feared and avoided, we can view them as opportunities for growth, self-discovery, maybe even creative inspiration.
I love that. And while we've been talking about the individual experience of nightmares, it's important to acknowledge that they're a universal human experience. Cultures around the world have their own beliefs and interpretations about dreams, including nightmares.
That's true. It reminds us that we're not alone in these experiences, no matter how strange or scary they seem.
Exactly. And learning about how other cultures view and interpret nightmares can give us an even broader understanding. It adds another layer to the conversation.
I love that. It's like each culture has its own dream dictionary, offering different perspectives on this world of dreams.
And by exploring those different views, we can get a deeper appreciation for how complex and mysterious nightmares really are. We can see them as not just personal experiences, but reflections of our shared humanity.
That's a beautiful thought. So even though we've covered so much, from the science of sleep to the psychology of dreams, I think the biggest takeaway is this. Nightmares, though often frightening and unpleasant, are part of being human.
Right.
And by approaching them with curiosity, compassion, and a willingness to learn, we can turn those nighttime terrors into opportunities for growth, self-discovery, even creative inspiration.
Perfectly said. It's about embracing the mystery and complexity of our dream lives rather than trying to control or suppress them. It's about listening to those whispers from our subconscious and letting them guide us on a journey of self-discovery.
And even though that journey might take us through some dark and unsettling places,
Yeah.
it can also lead to unexpected beauty, wisdom, and creative breakthroughs.
I think that's a perfect place to pause. It's a message of hope and empowerment for anyone who's ever felt lost or afraid in their own dreams. It's a reminder that even in the darkest nights, there's always potential for light and transformation.
Wow. It's amazing how much we've learned about nightmares.
Yeah, it's been a really deep dive.
Right. From the science of sleep cycles to cultural interpretations, there's clearly a lot more to these nighttime experiences than we might think.
It really changes how you see nightmares, right? They aren't just random, meaningless things. There's a depth and complexity there that's worth exploring.
Totally. And I think one of the most important takeaways is that we have a choice in how we approach our nightmares. We can choose to be afraid of them, push them away, or we can embrace them, see them as opportunities for growth and self-discovery.
That's a great way to put it. It's about shifting our perspective, like you said earlier. Instead of seeing nightmares as something to be avoided, what if we saw them as a source of valuable information about ourselves?
Right. It's like our subconscious is trying to communicate with us through these dreams, giving us clues about our fears, our desires, maybe even our creative potential.
And one tool we can use to tap into that subconscious wisdom is dream journaling. By taking the time to record and reflect on our nightmares, we can start to identify patterns and decipher those symbols, really get a deeper understanding of what those dreams might be trying to tell us.
It's like having a direct line to our inner world, which is kind of cool when you think about it. You know, one of the articles you sent talked about how different cultures interpret nightmares, and I thought that was fascinating.
Oh, yeah. It's incredible how universal the experience of nightmares is, even though the interpretations can be so different.
Right. It shows that we're not alone in these experiences, no matter how strange or frightening they might seem.
Exactly. In some cultures, nightmares are seen as warnings from ancestors. In others, they're seen as opportunities for spiritual growth, even as portals to other realms. It's really fascinating.
It just reminds us that there's no one right way to interpret a nightmare. It's personal, you know, subjective. But by exploring all these different cultural perspectives, we can expand our own understanding and maybe find new ways to make sense of our own dream experiences.
And that openness to different perspectives is key to unlocking the potential within our nightmares. Instead of dismissing them as just bad dreams, what if we approach them with curiosity, with a sense of wonder, and let them guide us on our own journey of self-discovery?
I love that. And, it's important to remember that you don't have to go through this alone. If nightmares are causing a lot of distress or impacting your daily life, it's okay to reach out for professional help.
Absolutely. There's no shame in seeking support. Therapists who specialize in dream work can provide valuable guidance and support. They can help you understand the deeper meanings behind your nightmares and help you develop strategies to manage any anxiety or fear that they might be causing.
And there are also a lot of self-help resources out there, books, websites, even apps dedicated to dream interpretation.
Yeah, the important thing is to find what works best for you, whether that's journaling, therapy, or just talking to a friend or family member about your dreams.
And of course, like we talked about earlier, good sleep hygiene is essential for reducing those nightmares.
Right, those simple changes to your sleep routine can make a huge difference. A consistent sleep schedule, a relaxing bedtime routine, avoiding caffeine and alcohol before bed, making sure your bedroom is dark and cool and quiet. All of those things can help you sleep more peacefully and have fewer nightmares.
It's about creating a holistic approach to sleep health, physically and mentally.
Exactly. And I think that's a really good takeaway for our listeners. Nightmares, while often unsettling, can be understood, they can be managed, and they can even be transformed into opportunities for growth and self-discovery.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the world of nightmares, I want to leave everyone with this thought. If dreams are a window into our subconscious, what might your nightmares be trying to tell you? What hidden messages might they contain?
It's a question worth thinking about. And as we've learned today, the answers might surprise you.
So until next time, sleep well, dream big, and embrace the mystery and wonder of your nighttime adventures.
Sweet dreams, everyone.